Okay, we're going to get rolling here. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar on December 8th, 2022. I know this time of year is tough for everyone to take the time to get into a webinar, just winding down from the year. I know it's been a crazy year for a lot of the rebar industry as well as the construction industry. For those who can't make it, we will have this up on our website as a downloadable webinar after the fact. So just a little bit of stuff ahead of time here before we get started with the actual demo that we're going to take care of. We'll get to the demo, and at the end, we'll stop for a little question and answer period. As part of the question and answer period, there is a spot where you can type in the questions, and we'll try and answer them at the end there. So today's webinar, for those who aren't familiar, maybe you know already, our newest version of Allplan 2023 came out in October. With that, there has been some rebar enhancement to the current rebar tools we had. We have been a rebar tool for quite some time, 30 plus years, but as we get here in North America, finding out more and more some of the tools needed and or wish listed to make some more productivity within Allplan. So the idea of today's webinar is just to give you an idea of some of the tools that have been available and been enhanced, some of the newer tools available. And at the end, we know that sometimes it's a struggle for a company to understand and get into 3D solution and take their current detailing department and switch them over to 3D. So what I want to emphasize is we have been around for that long, and we do have the capability to do 2D detailing with our software, sort of what we've formed, what we call a hybrid solution to creating 2D and a 3D rebar detailing service. My name is Dave Bruce. I'm the business development manager here in Allplan for the fabrication side, rebar being more specific to that. And Frank Holtz, who is our senior technical consultant, is the guy who's going to be running the demo. So those of you who don't know me, haven't known me or haven't talked to me before, a lot of years of rebar detailing experience, both self-employed as well as with Harris Rebar, have some post-tensioning experience, 33 years of CAD software experience, and of those 30 of those have been in some sort of 3D modeling. Frank, who's going to be doing the demo here, is our senior technical consultant. Slideshow to catch up here. Okay, and there's his background. He is a civil engineer by trade. He's been in the industry for quite some time, and of that, he has 3 years of developing structural engineering software. So he is our in-house guru, techie / rebar, concrete, all things Allplan. So he will be taking care of the actual demonstration today, the webinar portion. So what we're going to cover here in the webinar are the new features for reinforcing inside of Allplan 2023, and we'll be touching on these particular subjects. So we're going to talk about the enhanced wall, column, and beam rebar tools within that. We did have them in 2022. There have been quite a few enhancements made for the 2023 version. We're going to talk about the release manager and rebar shape manager. Now, these have been a while in the making. They've kind of been foreshadowed to the general public here for some time. We just had some kinks and some things we had to develop internally in order for these things to be ready for release for our first iteration of both the release manager and the shape manager. So we'll be showing you that today. The shape manager, if you're not familiar with the software, we do shape recognition. You don't pick a shape from a list, you actually draw the shape. We'll tell you what you've drawn. If it's not in our shape tool or in our list of shapes, we're going to show you how you can create your shape and add it to the shape that Allplan recognizes it for further recognition. A new tool inside of 2023, the importing, exporting attributes and using Excel for mass data changes. So we're going to talk about that. And then the very last thing we're going to show is to show how we have a very familiar 2D portion of detailing that's more productive and it gives you this 2D, 3D solution. You can actually do both a 2D and a 3D detailing inside of the same project and be very effective doing so. So we're gonna touch at that at the very end. So at this point here, we're just gonna let Frankie go ahead and take away the demo portion. And at the end of the demo, as I said, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat portion there. We'll be happy to answer them near the end. And we look forward to having you see what we got here in 2023.
Thank you, Dave, for that introduction, and thank you everybody for attending today's webinar. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things today, but first we're going to be starting with some of our apps, our automated Python parts in Allplan, and we're going to show those off in this structure here. It's a mixed material building with steel and concrete, but as the name suggests, we're looking at the rebar detailing tools, so just focusing in on the concrete elements today. We have a wall over here to the north side of the building, some columns and foundations that we'll be tackling today towards the south as well. So to begin, I'm first going to zoom in on my walls, and then I'm going to hide some of my steel elements here just for clarity so we can better see our wall behind it. And everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with our bar regular reinforcement tools. You know, we can create bar shapes, we can do placements or special placements, and we have all kinds of tools for area placements as well. Great for a lot of the generic, esoteric kind of structures, but we do have newer automation tools here under our Engineering Structures tab in 2023 that automate some of the more specific elements like our walls, our beams, our columns, our slabs. And so as we mentioned, we're going to first look at our wall. So I'm going to launch that tool here from the ribbon, the automated wall reinforcement tool. And we're just going to follow the workflow. So it says the first step is to select the walls on the floor we're looking at. We can also select a wall above, as we'll see later, for the columns and kind of take those bars from one floor to the next. Or afterwards, as you know, with our split, join, and our coupler tools, we can easily cut this wall in half or the reinforcement inside it in half and add splices or couplers if we need to quite easily as well. Right now, though, we're just using the wall tool to create the reinforcement for the entire wall. And we won't go into all of the attributes for all of the different apps we'll be looking at today. So I'm going to go more deeply in the first ones, and then we'll see that the other ones kind of carry the same rhythm or workflow. So on the General tab, we can set some basic rebar default minimum parameters, so minimum sizes, maximum spacings. And then over here on the next few tabs, this is where the designer is actually entering the information in from the engineer. And you know, those standards that we had on the General tab could be industry standards, company standards, and if they're violated by the designer, they'll get a warning letting them know that something was below a minimum, above a maximum, and that they should possibly reconsider it. We can also do pin stirrups or hairpins if we'd like. We can also add some additional reinforcement, some spacers, some clamps, what have you, but we won't be doing any of those today. Also on a lot of these, we have the ability to create automatic sections and place elevations and different types of views and sections, and it will actually go and automatically label those in some ways, and so we'll be seeing some of that in the column as well. Alright, so once I've saved all my parameters, entered all my parameters in here, as you know, we can always save and load favorites in every palette in Allplan, so I only got to enter this information once, save it to the company directory, and now everybody can pull it up and use it whenever they need it, and we can name it based on projects or clients or any other kind of organizational technique we may have. Alright, so once I've entered those parameters, I can just hit this create. And it'll take a second, but it'll add these little yellow boxes on a construction line, letting us know that we have the Python part there, and we can go back and edit any time. It's actually associated with this wall, these newer ones are. So if we make any changes to the wall, we'll see the changes in the Python part as well, and we'll see some again over that on the column. Alright, so this has put a lot of bars in for us really fast, but it's also very important that we can exert fine control and kind of get the situations that we need to. So we can see this has added some hairpins for us, which is not necessarily what we want because we're, got two wall corners here and maybe want to connect the reinforcement in some way. So I'll go ahead and now, even though we put a lot of these bars in here automatically with the Python part, I can just as simply go and delete the ones I don't want. In the case of these bars, I'm actually going to stretch the whole thing down together, the vertical, the horizontal bars, it's going to shrink up the horizontal bars and then, decrease the number of vertical bars and maintain that proper spacing that we have there. Oh, looks like I dragged it down too much. Let me try that again. So again, just using my regular stretch routine. This works on every single thing in Allplan. Not just the bars, but the model and inserts and other kinds of hardware as well. So once I've done that, I'm going to go over to our library, look at some of our Python parts, our older form finder component ones. These still work great in a lot of situations. They're being updated and added to the ribbon all the time, but there's still some great ones in here. We'll look at this wall corner one in particular. Has a lot of different modes of operations, used in a lot of different wall situations. Very powerful indeed. I'm going to load up a favorite here. These favorites again are just great because they're just saving me all the trouble of having to enter all this information. And so all I have to do is load it, click the spot, hit escape, and now we have those connecting bars in the corner for us. Alright, so for posterity we'll go ahead and do the same treatment to the other side of the wall. So I'm just going to go ahead and stretch these bars back. And then finally load up that corner reinforcement one more time, load my favorite, and then get close to the edge where the two walls meet, and it will place that, that group of bars there for me. Alright, so now I have a lot of bars in here. As you know, we can do our rearrange marks. It's going to go and find all of the bars that are the same size and shape within a tolerance and automatically add those together to make sure they're all just listed at the same time. And so to see that, we'll go ahead and create a legend or a schedule. First one I'm going to do is just one of our default ones. I like this one a lot. Some of our rebar detailers, when they first get an Allplan, they're not a fan of how big this is and all the information that's on it. They usually like to go back to the more typical ones where they have the ABC dimensions that everybody's familiar with. But more and more I'm seeing people adopt these where it actually shows this dimensioned little schematic of the bar right inside of the schedule. They find that it's a better communication with their clients and the people out in the field as well. Alright, so now we're going to go look at our next part of the structure, which is these columns down here on the bottom right. So I'm just going to zoom in over to those on my perspective. So I can see all my columns. These are the columns in the bottom right, just to give a reference. And then we're actually going to focus in on this column over here on the bottom left. And I'm going to use the automated column reinforcement tool, just working on a single column to show some different functionality in here. Of course, as soon as I click it, it's going to give me the example. If I choose to place a second column, I just check this box and then it'll be asking me for that. Very similar to the other automated reinforcement tools where we have a general minimums, maximums, just requirements basically. Then we can enter parameters about the rebar. You can see this will actually crank it up for us as it goes from one floor to the next. Stirrups can be done in different regions. These are just the second, third version of some of these tools. They're expanding all the time, new creature comforts, new functionality. If you have anything that you'd like to see in here that's not currently in there today, let us know and we'd be happy to consider it and potentially add it to a newer version or another version down the line. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to my workflow tab and hit create. So now this has created my bars for me, which now lets me go to the next part of the workflow, which is to create these sections and views. So I can enter some parameters over here. Do I want to see an elevation, cross sections, what do I want to label? Again, saving all that as a favorite. You only have to enter it once and now everybody can use it. After I hit this create button, it's going to ask me for a point in plan for the bottom left corner to place these sections and views in about this arrangement that we see in the corner. So when I do that, we can see that it's added some dimensions for us. On our elevation, some elevation points. We also have some sections ready to go for the top, middle, bottom if they were differing. After I do a quick rearrangement, we can see that these bars now share marks. So we got a number 10 bar over there, or sorry, the mark 10 bar over there. And I can begin just labeling this like I always do. Of course, any bars created by the apps are just like the bars created by the user, and they can be labeled and manipulated and operated in all the same kind of ways. Alright, So now I'm going to get rid of this one column that I did. I'm just going to do all the columns together. Again, launching my automated reinforcement tool for columns. Now I'm just going to zoom out, select all of these different columns here. It will quickly show me a preview of what it's going to create. Now I can hit the create button. Even though there's 9 columns, it's pretty quick to create. It's that fast. All of the bars have now been created. We can see they're just different rainbows of colors. We haven't rearranged the marks just yet on them. If I do hit rearrange marks, we'll notice that it's going to pick up all of the short columns. You know, they're going to have the same length of bars. Tall columns are a little longer. Even in these corners, we can see that this column is, 2 foot by 1 foot 4. This is also 2 foot by 1 foot 4, but they're different orientations. That's no problem. It can detect that the bars inside are the same size and shape and automatically mark those together for us, which makes it easier to group things for releases and other project management down the way after the detailing is done. Alright, so another thing I can do is I can actually, I mentioned how we can, these columns or the object and the Python part that's interacting with the object are linked. And so if I come here to my column and I can change it through the parameters, or I can use my direct object modification, of course. So if I change this to say 1 foot 2, now I double click on my Python part, we're going to see that it's going to automatically update it according to the correct size and then fill it in properly. Alright, so now that I have my columns, some reinforcement in there, I'm going to go and add some reinforcement to my schedule or to my, my foundation. Before I do that, I'm going to create a section or a view just looking from the right side, and then just place this down over here. Something else that's new to 2023 is the automatic dimensioning and labeling in some of these views and sections. This we've had in previous versions, but only for specific customers. We're now opening that up to the wider world. And so again, if there's some features you like about it, just let us know, or don't like about it or want to see change, again, let us know, because we're updating those all the time currently. Alright, so create the section view because we're going to use one of our older parts which requires it. So this column foundation. So let me go ahead and load up a favorite for here. And this one's another nice one, like the wall corner. We can choose some basic shapes, enter some basic parameters, and now it will expand and adapt. We just find the intersection point between the column and the foundation, and it will add those bars there for us. A nice thing about these old ones, they still have a lot of functionality, so I'm actually able to come in here and copy this foundation from one foundation to another. And because it was copied, it's identical. It knows it's actually linked in some kind of way in the background. And so now if I come to one of my foundations from the original copy, or from any of the copies, and I change this spacing value, you can see here I made it much wider. It's going to ask me if I want to update those identical Python parts that were created, basically the copies or the original if this was a copy. Once I hit yes, we'll see that they both update. Now it's got that wider spacing over there. So we have a lot of reinforcement in our walls, our columns, some of our foundations. At this point, we're going to skip ahead to the project management side of this, where you're actually working with the bars, controlling the release, and information, the attribute information about them. So real quick, just do another rearrange marks. So now that I got all those combined together, I'm going to open up our brand new tool in 2023. This is the Release Manager. So this new tool, it's quite compact, but it does a lot of stuff for us. Previous versions of Allplan, you had to add the release information by hand using our add attributes tools. But now we've created this slick interface to kind of ease that or make that easier to do in a more controlled situation, so that you actually are not messing anything up. You have a full view of what all the releases are, what bars are on each release, how much weight's on there, all that kind of stuff. So you really do get a chance to management before you go into any other real PM software. We're just really trying to do the detailing, but we need to get that information over to the management software in a very smart way. And So this is our first attempt at that, and so we'll take a look at that now. So the first thing we're going to do is, this is a blank project. There's no releases in here, so I'm going to first add a release. Before I do that, I need to add a bid item. So I'm just going to call this bid. My first release is going to be 111, and I'm going to name this columns. Select my bid, and now it's added that release. It cleared it all out, so I can quickly create a second one. Call this 222, and we'll use this on our walls. After I hit add release, I can hit close, and now we'll go back and we'll see our two releases here ready to be populated. So the first one I'm going to do is my columns. So I'm going to first select my release, then I'm going to hit add bars to release. Now I'll just select all of my column bars. We can see immediately that all of that data is loaded in here. We have the weight for each of the bars, the mark number, what kind of shape it is, and some other information about it as well. Next, I'm going to add my walls to my release. I'm going to add my wall bars to my release. So I'll click my walls release 222, hit add bars, and now just simply select all the bars up here on the top left, and we can see that those have been added to the release as well. Alright, so to see the effect of our work with the release manager, the first and most obvious place is just the attribute data itself. I can modify the attributes. I can see that the information's been applied. I can modify this individually if I want. Another way to see it is in a schedule. So we'll go ahead and create a schedule. This one's going to be a master schedule with some sub schedules or sub lists. And we can see this one's organized by releases. So we have all of our columns in one sub list, and then our walls in a second sub list. Another new feature to 2023. Well, actually in 2022 we added the ability to sort by attributes. But now in 2023 we actually expose the reinforcement data, what we call engineering data. Things like the diameter, the release attribute data that we just added. So I can hit my release description. So I have all my not defined. This is basically not my bars. And then the ones that are defined are my bars. So I can see here I have my columns. If I click here, I can see my walls. And now I want to actually make some changes. So the first change I'm going to make is, I notice that I have these foundation bars with my columns. Maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. For this example, we're going to say it's not and actually modify those. And so I know what these mark numbers are. They're the 18, 19. They're basically the last ones that were created. So if I go over here to my release manager and I select my columns release, I can just scroll all the way down, grab these last few bars, and then actually change their release. I don't have a release yet for it, so I'm going to go add a release. This will be 333 foundations. Also on the same bid item. And now I have these bars already selected, so I'm going to hit change release. I'll see if the 333 is available. Notice the 111 is not in there because that's the release that they're currently on. So I can hit OK. Now it's updated it. In real time, we immediately see that the objects palette has updated. If I close this out and scroll over, I can see that now my schedule is updated, so a new sublist has appeared at the foundations, indicating those as well. And then if we click the foundations here, we can see that we do have in fact our foundations, our columns are still our columns, and our walls are still our walls. Alright, so now that we have that attribute data, the first and most important thing we do is we send it to the places it needs to be. Those are your bending machines. We can go directly to that. Of course, most of the time in a fab shop, we're actually using ASA or Sule or some other kind of management software, to handle all the steps that come after the detailing. So we can export directly to these file types. It's actually an ASA file. It's actually a Sule file. We work very closely with these companies to try and make these line up as closely as they can, and we're expanding it all the time. But at the base, what it does is it's just saving the steps of typing this bar information over into the details section of the other software. It's going to let you enter some basic information about who drew them, what project, what release ID information, and then you can save this as a Sule file and then actually load it in there without, like I said, having to type that information yourself. Because this is basic attribute data in Allplan, we have all the attribute data tools available to us. One of those under the teamwork is the exporting attributes. So if I export attributes, I can select a report template, a location, a file type. This time I'm going to be using an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm just going to do all the bars inside of my project here. I can see that I have my bars listed. And actually, before I do that, I wanted to show that we can also work with the status. So if I change my object palette filtering here to release status, we can see everything's currently detailed. If I go back to my release manager, I can click on my foundations or any of my releases and then change this to a listed status. And now we can see that these wall bars or these foundation bars are now listed as a listed status, and the rest of them are unlocked a detailed state. We don't do much with the locking just yet, but in the upcoming versions we're going to have a whole system around these lock bars depending on the status of it once it's been released. So going back to the export, so I'm just going to export all of this data. It's going to immediately start into the program, Excel spreadsheet, and I can manipulate this. This is not just for Rebar, but this also could be used on any object in Allplan. I can read all of the attribute data, and now this data I can take it and put it into another Excel spreadsheet, post-process it, send it to a different piece of software perhaps. But one thing that you can do in here is actually edit this data right inside the Excel spreadsheet. So I can change the status of these perhaps to listed for my walls, and then just use my regular old Excel tools, the drag and drop and drag, or whatever this is called, the where you have the corner here. Basically just copying and pasting these values down this column. So now I'm going to save this, close it, and we have an import attributes. And now I'm going to just import the same one that we created and modified, and as soon as I do that, it's going to bring up our import attribute tool. This just shows us which objects are getting updated and what attribute is changing and what the value is changing from and to. And then you just have the option to import it or not import it, so I'll hit OK. And now it doesn't look like much has changed, but if we click the listed, we can see that we were able to update the status of these bars through an Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, if we do it through the release manager interface, it's going to be much more controlled. We have the ability to lock bars or lock the status changing of it, or prevent other kind of changes when they're in certain state that we don't want changes to occur. All right. Next up, we're going to create some couplers. So in the 2022, I think it might have been added in the tail version of 2021, some new coupler data. Of course, we have a lot of manufacturers in here, and we also have the generic coupler. So if your manufacturer's not in here, first let us know so that we can add it. We're adding these, at the customer's request. We think we got most of the big ones in here, but you can always second use this coupler, which is just a generic one. But like I said, in the 2022 version, I think maybe the 2021 version, the Dayton Superior and the bar splice catalogs were added, and then now in the 2022 version we have these NMB splice sleeves. These work a little bit different than the rest of our couplers because they're directional couplers, meaning that they have a grout port and it always needs to point to the concrete surface. So these have a directional information that a lot of other couplers don't have. Fortunately, in the 2021 version, I believe, or maybe the 2020 version, they added the ability to deal with this rotation and actually control it in some kind of ways. It's very early tools. We're looking to improve it and expand it, and so you'll see some new changes in a future release, and if you have a suggestion, let us know. But I'm going to show you the way that works today in 2023. It's not bad, it's just, it can be better, and we're working on it. But we're going to show you how you can add these now, and in a little bit I'll show you how we can actually control the direction a little bit better. But when I put them in this time, using our cut and splice tool here, it's actually in the right orientation, so that's good for us now. So I'm going to cut these guys just by drawing a line, choosing a direction that I want the coupler to point. People who use this system, they know that each of these couplers can actually be used for 1 or 2 sizes down. So I'm choosing a number 5 bar. and the system knows that number 6 or number 7 can actually work on this. We have, of course, the UX system and the slim sleeve version of these available as well. So now once I've selected that, I only need to hit OK a couple of times, and it's going to add my coupler here for me. If we go ahead and zoom in, we can see what that looks like. And doing this in 3D is great now because we have a true sense of what's happening in the model, or it's what's going to be happening inside of the concrete. So I can see, first thing I need to do is actually just move this bar down by a little bit to avoid that port right here. Now also I can see that maybe these columns or these bars need to change in size by some amount, perhaps, or maybe moved in by a little bit. So I'll just try a couple of little controls right here. First thing I'm going to do is create a section looking at it from the south. And then all I really want to do is just stretch this one bar out. So I always like to show off how easy it is. Again, even though a lot of these bars were created really quickly for us using apps or any of the other bar shape tools, it's really easy for me to come in here, hit stretch, and now I can filter by bars. Don't have to worry about what I'm selecting, and then I'm just going to move this over by some small amount here, or maybe probably too much. But I just like to show that you really do, get some fine control of what's happening inside the model, and it can make not just your estimates better, but the actual details of it better too, so you can get a real sense of what's going in here. We also have the PVC slides or pipes that you can put in here as well to get that grout inside the coupler. All right. So now that we've added some couplers, we're going to look at these couplers a little more actually. So I'm going to flip over to another project where I have isolated one of these foundations here, and I have my 3D object. I have a couple of views for it, and what I was talking about earlier with the couplers, so when I create a bar in Allplan, I'm going to be creating it in this view. It's looking east, and when I do, the bar always remembers the direction that it was created in. And whenever I create this bar and then I go and add the coupler to it, the coupler is always going to face south or into the negative Y direction. And I always need to first create this one bar, and then I need to add a coupler to it. So I'm going to add another one of these splice sleeve couplers here, just to the top of my placement. And so we can see, as I said, it's always pointing south. So if these bars were in the other place, even if I hooked them outward towards the north face, the grout port will still be facing inside to the south, which we don't want. So if we only need them on this side, we would first have to create it on this side, and now we can do placements of these. So I can take these already placed bars, and then I'm going to say I want to do it on the left, and now I can just basically do a placing line in any direction that I want in order to get those port tubes in the right direction. So just remember that whenever you create a bar in a section, it always is going to remember that first time you shaped it, where it was, which orientation it was facing. And then whenever I create my grout tube, it'll always face south, and then any additional placements, it's just going to maintain the relative orientation of the coupler to the bar. So that's how you can get these hooks in different directions and get these ports heading in different directions as well. Alright, so going back to our previous project, just to finish off over there. One thing you may have noticed is that for our straight bars, they currently say 99, which means it's an unrecognized shape. And this gives us a chance to show off another one of our new features, new tools that we have, and this is the Shape Code Manager. So I'll go ahead and launch that. So the Shape Code Manager is pretty straightforward. We just let users create the shape, and then it automatically does some different things for them, determining the minimum, maximum angles based on whether it was drawn acute or obtuse. You can apply a series of rules, what the width should be, which direction should be. So in the case of, let's see, we have this T1 bar on the side. So we can see that's a closed stirrup. We have a B, C, D, E dimension. It's all been shown there. Some requirements, some rules for this bar is that we have the same length for the B and the D, and we have the same length for the C and the E. We have a lot of options about, what kind of rules, whether there's a width, which one is the width direction, which one's the height direction, what is the width, what is the height. Variables supposed to be, do things need to have the same length or not the same length. So it's real easy for us to define these rules and actually determine exactly what shape it needs to be for the user. Adding a shape is extremely easy. I basically get to draw a freeform shape of bar. If I hold shift, it's going to lock it to the 45s. And it's automatically going to add some of the most common dimensions and nomenclature for us. I right click, it's going to complete the creation of the shape. I can see that I did all acute angles, so it's doing 0.1 to 89.9, but I could easily get rid of this and then it would have no requirement in that kind of way. I can add end prep for headed bars. I can add hooks into and out of plane, and it shows me in the preview here a nice little isometric view of what it might look like to create those bars as well. For this one though, we're just doing a simple straight bar, so let me delete this unsaved shape, and I'm just going to do a horizontal line, right click, and it's as simple as that to create a bar, and it's only going to have one dimension, which is the B. And now to save this to Allplan, all I got to do is hit save, type in the value, and now it's given it a bar name. It should appear at the bottom of our list. Now when we go back to Allplan, we should see that updates as well. So now we can see after I refresh, it's going to show us that this is now a STR, which I labeled it, and then it's pulling that B dimension for us automatically. Alright, so the last thing we're going to look at today is not exactly a new feature, but it's kind of an obscure one that people don't usually know about, and I'd like to show it off here today. It's more of like an advanced feature, which is technically the topic of this demonstration. So here I just have no model at all. We can see these are just simple lines, 2D. There's nothing in our 3D model whatsoever, so I'm just going to be looking at our plan view. If I go to the options and I go under reinforcement and I uncheck this reinforce with 3D model, this is what we call model off reinforcement. And so all of our reinforcement, we can still use our cool reinforcement tools in a lot of the same ways that we have, but now we can actually just do it in a 2D object without having to create any kind of 3D at all. Some of our very large customers, very large shops, they are working only in 2D. They have a lot of guys in 2D that are very efficient that way. And we don't want to, change some of them, or maybe just change some of them. And so this is a great kind of stopgap for larger companies where you have a mix of people who want to embrace 3D and then others who want to, keep working in the 2D because that's what they know and that's what's quickest for them. All right. So as I mentioned, we're just using our regular bar shape tools in all the ways that we normally do. I can use all my shapes, all of my tables and functionality here, and even my expanding and adapting to edges, right? It's just looking for some kind of 2D shape to fill it. The big difference comes is after I shape the bar, once I go to place it, I'm not now selecting a view and then it's figuring out how they're orthogonal and which direction exactly that they relate to each other. And with the model off reinforcement, after I shape a bar, I have to choose where I'm going to do my which direction I'm going to look at for my placement. So I'm going to say I want to view this from down below from the south. And now I'm going to do a placement on the right of my placing line. And now I'm just going to draw a placing line in this top here. And so it gets a side view and then just places those 6 inches on center or whatever my quantity selected is. And of course you have all the same features here, so I can choose to only show the middle bar. And I'll do this as a dimension line with a bar mark right on the bar. We have all of our standard dimensioning, labeling bar tools are available here, and they work in exactly the same way. Alright, so now I'll do a straight bar with hook. A couple of 90 degrees on the end. Of course, after I shape the bar, it's going to ask me what direction I want to view it from, so I'm going to do a plan view, so I'm going to look at it from above in this sense. And now I'm just going to do a placement with the right line over here. And maybe I'll choose a different bar so it's not overlapping my other bars, the one I chose to display. Now I'll place a dimension line here. And I'll do the same thing in the other direction. So placing it in this view now, notice is basically what it's really doing is it's just shaping, using this 2D stuff to create the proper shape so that when I place it, it knows what the length should be, and then it gets all the other dimension data for us automatically. So now I'll do a placement in the other direction. And like before, I'm going to choose a single bar over here on the left to represent it. And then I'll place a dimension or a range line up above. All right, last bar we're going to do is another straight bar with hooks. And I'm just going to draw this one without the expand and adapt. And so let's say I want these bars to go from the top there down, and then I'm going to put a negative 90-degree hook. And this one I'm going to view from above. And then here's another tool, not brand new to Allplan, but it's a little esoteric. People don't always know about it. It's our place along segment. This is really great. Not just useful for our model off reinforcement, but also the model on reinforcement as well. With the perpendicular rotation angle selected, once I choose this segment, now I can actually choose segments of a tie or stirrup and then just select each of those segments, and it's going to place it, use that to create a placing line for me. So it's really just doing a placing line start and end right here on this bar, but it's a real quick way to change the orientation, everything for you. Once I create those bars, of course, I'm going to want to label them like so. Remember, you can always click any line in Allplan. It's going to adapt that rotation for the text. And now that I place this here, I have enough bars. And you know, this isn't live link back. You know, there's no model to link back to. So some of the 2D stuff, we need to make sure we're handling that on our end. You know, this section over here. Oops, I want to do a mirror with copy. This section over here, we could easily do more placements, and when we do placements with this tool in the model off reinforcement, there's an add number box here. So if I choose these bars and I'm going to view it from the right, I don't want to increase the count. I just want to show it in this other view, so I can easily turn it on right here and then have it show without adjusting the quantities. And when I say the quantities, like I said earlier, what I mean is it's actually doing a full like kind of 3D design in the background where it's tabulating, keeping all this data, and so we get all of that benefit like we do in the 3D without actually having to create any 3D. So I'm able to get my automated list of reinforcements. I'm easily able to send this data out to Sule, ASA, or even a bending machine directly without creating any 3D at all. Alright, I think that was the last thing I wanted to show today, Dave, so I'll go ahead and pass it over to you to complete this webinar here. Thank you everybody for your time, and I hope we enjoyed today's lesson. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Can you hear me now? Sorry guys, it's the microphone switched over. My apologies for that. I got two microphones running here. So to backtrack what I was saying there, as just finding out that you weren't hearing me, that the 2D portion that Frank showed there at the very end, what we're trying to let you know is the ability for you to jump into our software and look at it from a project driven. All the information that you're doing in the 2D is we're still technically BIM without having a 3D. There's still information tied to that. There's a unique identifier for each and every single bar, which will allow you to do everything in the BIM world, but from a 2D aspect. So if you're looking to, kind of navigate slowly through the 3D world, our software will let you do that. And at any time during the process of a project, if you got a more complex shape, you can simply go to those options there, turn on the 3D portion, the model on portion, and then generate the 3D of the rebar to really dial into what needs to be built, and you can flip back over to 2D. So we allow as a software to have both in one. There's no segmentation of your project across multiple DWG files, multiple DXF files, and so on. So the general idea is Allplan as a software being project driven. You've got it all in one. You can do what you continue to do now, and as you can see with some of the tools, you can actually be quite more productive. No cover lines required, none of that is required. Automatic shape recognition, you don't have to pick a shape. Do everything you're used to doing, but with the enhancements, and then you can slowly roll into the 3D world just with the click of a button. No extra software is needed. The other enhancements, as you saw, are they've been working on a while. They're enhancements from what you've seen in 2022. So we have the ability to, we're always enhancing the tools within here for the North American market, as well as taking wish list items and seeing when we can get them into software as soon as we can. I do see we have some questions here. One of the questions is, you cannot see the release manager icon in your current 2023 version. So as it stands, and as I mentioned, the release manager and the Rebar shape manager is two different things. We've been developing them and getting where they need to be for this particular release. Now, they did not make the cutoff to have the icon automatically included in the installation, but if you just reach out to our technical department, we'll be able to send you an executable file that will allow you to install both the release manager and Rebar shape manager, and we can have them instruct you how to add the icons and actually launch the tools. So by all means, reach out to the technical department, and we'll definitely get you set up with that. Another question we had here is, can we work, if the current process is, we get DWG files, can we work with those PDF files? If you're familiar with our other webinars we've hosted, we can work directly. We can bring DWG files directly. We can bring PDF directly, which will allow the automatic conversion into line work that you can use. We can deal with Revit files. We can deal with that. So we have both your 2D and 3D world covered by bringing information in, so you can start detailing essentially right away. And that brings down some of the downtime from going from what you get from the engineer / contractor into what you can detail. So it's very similar to the package. What we're giving you is an alternate package that we know will increase your productivity both in the 2D world as well as the 3D world, that it's all in one. Another question here. So what are the benefits of the 3D compared to the 2D? The benefits of the 3D compared to the 2D is the 2D, you get more production, obviously right off the bat. You can be even more productive. Again, past webinars we've shown, I believe in the most recent webinar we've hosted is the automatic section generation, where Frank was showing you if you want to put the rebar in another section view, you have to generate the rebar again, and every section you want that rebar in, you have to keep adding it in. Whereas with the 3D portion of that, if you did the same tool, two-step process to maybe a one-step process to create that pad footing, we have automatic sections. So if you put rebar in one, it automatically generates in whatever section is cutting through that original object. So the section generation tool is where you get even more enhancement. From there, you also have the ability to export that 3D rebar to many different forms where people can review it effectively. IFC model up to our BIM Plus format. The IFC model go into any other IFC collaboration tool like a Navisworks. Any one of those will be able to go in and bring it in, and you can very effectively look at the rebar, generate it around, and do that. So the 3D world brings you that one step further. And if you're familiar with their software and you get comfortable with the 2D, jump into the 3D world makes it's almost a no-brainer. And you can be a lot more productive in doing that. I don't think I see any more. Oh, just hang on here. Just have one pop up here. Will this work on precast items such as vaults and head walls? So one of the things we did not showcase in here is the precast portion of our sister company, which used to be Planbar, has been included in the Allplan AEC package, which allows for you to do a little bit more with the rebar and automatic drawing generation. But you can use, some of the tools that we have with precast items. As long as there's a modeled object, you can put whatever rebar you want in there. But if you want to make it even more and have parts where drawing files are generated, we can take it one step further. We can have these without you going to a full-blown walls package or flooring package. We have just the AEC package, which will allow you to do a lot of precast elements, stairs, walls, and so on, and generate automatic drawings for those. We do have some head walls that are already in our Python parts area. May not be exactly what you're looking for, but it's definitely there. Another one came in. Sorry, it's just showing here. I gotta scroll. Okay. Being able to preset per structure size for rebar and use it for any other structure size. So if I'm not mistaken, I think what you're asking is, if you do the rebar in one, will you be able to transfer the same sort of configuration from one to another? It depends on how that rebar was put into the original object. If it was done via a Python part, absolutely 100% yes. If a lot of the rebar was put in manually, then there are certain items that will adjust to that, and then there's other items that will need to be adjusted manually. But for the most part, you'll probably get 90%, and then 10% a little bit of modification that's required once you get it over there. So you can definitely transfer rebar from one structure to another, and again, dependent on how the rebar was put in the original. So I don't see any other questions on here. So I think at this point, the webinar is complete. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and this has been recorded, so at any time if you want to go to our website, I give it a few days for it to be uploaded to there and downloaded again for future reference and so on. Or if you know of someone who would be interested in something that you have seen within your company or another company that you deal with, by all means, let them know, and they can go to our website and download as well. But again, thank you for taking time and joining us today. I wish you all well, and we will talk to you all soon.